Hey there, welcome back to Throne FC. When you started watching football, there were some players that were absolutely everywhere, but out of nowhere, they simply vanished from the spotlight and you never even thought about them again before seeing this video. It truly feels like they disappeared, but today I'm gonna turn into Sherlock Holmes and tell you exactly where they are now. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. Starting out with this tenacious midfielder, Arturo Vidal. The Chilean international broke out in football with Bayer Leverkusen and as a part of a golden generation that won back-to-back Copa America titles. He would go on to play for Juve, Bayern and Barca, but after a final stint in Italy with Inter, most European fans stopped hearing about him. But in fact, Vidal is still going strong. At 36 years old, he's still a very important piece in Flamengo and even adapted his crazy hairstyle to match the colors of Mengão. Don't worry about him, he's enjoying his pre-retire life in the beautiful beaches of Rio in Brazil. Unlike our next man, who hasn't had much fun in the last 2 seasons. I'm talking about Edison Cavani. The Uruguayan legend was one of the most important players who cemented PSG as an elite club. But with both Neymar and Mbappe in the club, Cavani lost space and eventually signed with Manchester United. He would have a pretty solid debut season there, but once again, another star came in and took his spot. This time, they even took his number 2. So after a season where he only scored twice, Cavani departed to Valencia in a move that barely made headlines. Well, just like his time there, I guess. But to be fair with Cavani, he wasn't joining a Valencia team fighting for European qualification, instead his mission was to avoid relegation, and he did just that. Now before you forget about Cavani again, I'm just gonna tell you that it's highly likely that he'll either stay with Loche next season or move to Argentina to play with Boca, since it's a dream move that he wanted to fulfill before retiring. At number 8, we have Pedro Rodriguez. If you grew up during the late 2000s, you probably remember this wonder kid. During his time with Barca, Pedro was fundamental to their success, playing most of the times as a winger in that stellar squad. He won everything that there was to win with both Spain and Barca, and after he left for Chelsea, he continued to show how good he was in the Premier League. But after leaving Chelsea in 2020, I feel like the world had suddenly forgot about him. And what's weird about that is that he's still in Europe playing in Serie A with Lazio. In fact, he was once again an important squad member and even helped the club return to the Champions League. But it's only Lazio returning to the Champions League since the Spanish international is currently without a club after his contract ended last month. I'm curious if he'll retire or perhaps return to Spain. Our next player is perhaps the biggest cult hero in Portugal, the man who won the country's first and biggest prize until date, Éder Lopes. After being ridiculed for half a decade over being a striker who didn't score goals, it only took a couple of sessions with a mental coach and a long-range shot to change his fortunes. He became adored by his fellow compatriots, and at the time, many people expected it to be the turning point of his career. However, just as soon as the next season started, everything went back to what it was before. He continued to underperform with Lille, and perhaps due to some bitterness by the French fans, he was sent back into Russia. He played for 4 seasons there, never going past 6 goals in a single campaign, before retiring in Saudi Arabia in 2022, just before they started their crazy spending spree. Up next, we got a depressing story of a player who almost did the impossible, Josip Iličić. Back in 2020, before the pandemic started, everyone and their mother were talking about how impressive Iličić had been with Atalanta, scoring 4 goals in a single round of 16 match against Valencia. He was a driving force in that squad that almost made it to the Champions League semi-finals, only missing out due to 2 stoppage time goals. But Iličić wasn't even on that match as he was battling depression. The Slovenian striker faced a lot of trauma as a child, as he was a refugee from the Yugoslav wars. So it's understandable that all the death reports and isolation took a toll on his mental health. Initially, he was able to bounce back, even though it's said that he also got cheated on during that rough patch. But eventually, the depressive thoughts came knocking on his door again, and he relapsed once more. He never got his 2020 form back with Atalanta, so last year he decided to return to the country that received him when he was at his lowest as a child and joined Maribor. He certainly doesn't look in shape, but I hope that his mental state is better nowadays. If you wanna know more about Iličić and his story, I've made a video talking about him, it's in the first link in the description. At number 5, we got Jerome Boateng. Not too long ago, this man was considered one of the best centre-backs in the world and formed a lethal duo with Mats Hummels. But after an embarrassing performance in the 2018 World Cup, the two players went from world beaters to surplus to requirements. especially Boateng, who never returned to the national team after that year. He continued playing with Bayern, and even though he was no longer considered an automatic starter like he was in the past, he still won a treble with the club in 2020. But when his contract ended in 2021, he quietly departed to Lyon, where he currently plays. However, if you look up Jerome Boateng nowadays, you'll get more info about his love life than his playing stats. In these 2 seasons with Lyon, Boateng was mediocre at best, never showing the world-class levels that he had in Germany. To be honest, I think it's fair to say that the man has spent more time in court than on the pitch, since he was charged with domestic violence and had a girlfriend destroying his car and then committing suicide because he didn't want her back. All of this in the past 2 years. Nowadays, he's a free agent and I don't know if we will ever see him play again. Speaking of German World Cup winners, we got Julian Draxler. The German prodigy broke through with Schalke 04 and before he turned 20, he was already a German international. Even though he won the World Cup in 2014, his big break will only come 3 years later when PSG signed him. He impressed in his first 3 seasons there, but as PSG started to become filled with more and more stars, his play started to be questioned, and in 2022, he was loaned out to Benfica. But against the hopes of many Benfica fans, it turned out to be a massive flop, playing just a couple of matches before suffering a season-ending injury in February. He's back with PSG, but will probably be sold in this transfer window. At number 3, we got perhaps the most controversial player in this entire video, Dele Ali. The prodigious talent who burst onto the scene with his audacious skills and eye for a goal at MK Dons quickly established himself in his first season with Spurs back in 2015. He would become the maestro in a squad that ultimately didn't win anything, but made it all the way to the Champions League final. But after Pochettino's dismissal, Mourinho was appointed as a new manager and started playing Ali in a more attacking role. Initially, that change actually gave good results, but in the following season, it fell out of favor with Mourinho due to laziness and lack of commitment. After this, he never bounced back and was transferred to Everton, but again, he never showed anything on a pitch. It felt like his untalented twin had swapped places with him. So this past season, Everton loaned him to Besiktas in order to light the fire back in him. It's the ideal place, a less competitive league, passionate fans, but his stay there couldn't have ended worse. And what would turn out to be his final match with the Eagles, Ali was replaced in the first half and left the field accompanied by a lot of booing from the Besiktas supporters. By the time you're watching this, Ali is probably inhaling his laughing gas, still without a club to play in the next season. Up next, we got Gonzalo Higuain. Although he had one of the best possible career starts, coming up with River in Argentina and then signing for Real Madrid, you certainly cannot say the same about the way he would evolve throughout his career. After losing the battle for number 1 striker against Benzema, Higuain retreated to Napoli and gained his confidence back, before getting a big move to Juventus. That stint only served to get silverware to his trophy cabinet, because it was during that period that Higuain received the most criticism for his constant misses and lack of fitness. He was loaned out 2 times to AC Milan and Chelsea, where he managed to actually win a final. Obviously, he didn't play in it. After those 2 unsuccessful stints, he left to play in the MLS with Inter Miami before retiring last year. And to finish our list of missing players, we got arguably the best striker of the last decade, Luis Suarez. El Pistolero got his big break during the 2010 World Cup, after which he never looked back, playing for Liverpool and most notably Barca, where he formed a lethal trio with Neymar and Messi. Just to paint a picture of how great he was, Suarez won 2 European Golden Shoes during Messi and Ronaldo's prime. He outscored legends, proved himself with his national team and even snacked on his opponents. Suarez was let go by Barca in 2020, but the next season he would have his revenge, winning the league with Atletico. He would stay for another year and then depart to his home country to casually win another league title, and at the time you're watching this, Suarez is still scoring goals in the Brazilian Championship with Grêmio. I guess he finished his European tour, but the South American one is just getting started. And that is it. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up so I know you want to see more content like this. And as always, don't forget to subscribe in order for me to grow the channel and for you not to miss another interesting football video. Thanks for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.